Medicine 3.0 listeners. We are so excited to be with you this morning. I have with me my fellow advisor, Anna Simmons, today, and we're going to talk to you about performance testing and the module that we offer as a focus area. Anna, welcome to the podcast this morning.
Thanks, Kelly. Excited to be back. I'm also excited to talk to you about performance testing because I was remembering about 2 years ago was when I met you before you joined Bionic full-time, building out our performance testing protocol, teaching me how to conduct performance testing. So excited to talk about it.
All right, to start us off, Anna, can you just give us an overview of why you would have someone do performance testing and then just walk us through what testing entails?
Yes, most of our members have some sort of goal, at least after onboarding, to incorporate exercise into their life. Some are already very involved in a program or have a long history of exercising, strength training, doing cardio, and some of our members don't currently have any exercise routine. But regardless, moving forward through learning more about why it's important to exercise, they have some goal of improving strength, flexibility, cardio. We recommend it to get a baseline of where our members are at currently in their fitness. They get percentiles, and that's also helpful to get a kind of a knowledge of where they're at and where they should go. So in performance testing, we offer a VO2 max test on a bike, maximal strength tests on a bench press and leg press, some muscular endurance testing through push-ups. We offer a hand grip strength test, as well as some movement and mobility assessments, and lastly, vertical jump test for power.
Awesome. Thank you. Obviously, we went through some of the testing that we're focused on, and then, of course, we want to collect our baseline, which is kind of the theme throughout a lot of our programs. So we want to have this baseline information so that we can make personalized recommendations, but also track things over time, because in the end, numbers by themselves are just numbers, but we want to use that to help tell a story about who you are, where you're going, and how we can help you achieve optimal health, right?
Absolutely. One of the reasons we like to talk about baseline and the importance of kind of getting an idea of where our members are at currently, a lot of them feel pretty nervous to come in for performance testing or feel like they need to train a little bit before they come in, but truly the purpose is to get a baseline of where they are, get some more information for improving moving forward. So there's really no pressure to get any certain score right off the bat. Really, it's just getting more information that's valuable for how to improve moving forward.
Yeah, I think one thing that's also helpful, we've had a number of people retest already, and I think all of them have seen improvements in their VO2 max for sure. Bench press strength has definitely increased. Mobility, most people are at a pretty good point when they come in, for the most part, not everyone, but that improves typically. So we've seen some pretty good improvements in scores from retest. So excited to keep having people come in so that we can keep evaluating that. But now I want to start diving into each test a little bit more in depth. So let's start with the VO2 max. That's probably the most popular portion of the test and the main reason why people are doing performance testing. So can you walk us through what people might expect from VO2 max testing to start, and like just the test protocol itself of, because a lot of times people get anxious about it.
Just kind of as a broad overview, we like to tell our members when they come in that VO2 max testing is the best measure of cardiorespiratory fitness. So it essentially measures how efficiently your aerobic system can use oxygen at maximal exertion efforts. So we kind of brief them that it's supposed to be a hard test. They're not doing it wrong if it feels really difficult, but it's not super long. So to start out, we'll get an EKG, resting heart rate. We'll do a little intake about their current habits, make sure they don't have any injuries or any concerns going into testing. And then from there, we have a mask that they'll wear throughout the whole test. So that's kind of another added challenge during the test to wear that. But that's how we gather their VO2 max. So they wear a mask for it, get set up on the bike. You can do it outside of Bionic, either on a bike or a treadmill, but we do all of our VO2 max tests on a bike kind of for safety. To start out, they'll be at 50 watts for 2 minutes as a warm-up, which will feel super light and easy, just kind of getting warmed up, introduced into the test. And really throughout the test, all they're going to do is focus on staying at the same cadence. So we show them on the bike where they see their RPMs, speed of around 60 to 80 is where we keep them the whole time. And then from there, after the 2-minute warm up, the bike will increase wattage by 20 watts every minute. So it's kind of a graded exercise test. It gets a little bit more intense. All they have to do is focus on keep moving their legs at that pace, and essentially go as long as they can. We'll sometimes stop the test early if we see their VO2 max is no longer increasing, or if their heart rate is starts to decrease for whatever reason. But most of the time, it's just whenever they decide they want to stop or they can't keep up that cadence of 60 to 80 throughout the entire test. So it completely depends on current fitness level, how long the test lasts. For some people, it's done pretty quick. Some people, they can go 15, sometimes 20 minutes, but that's generally as long as it lasts. And then from there, we do a nice cool down, get them relaxed, and then move into the rest of testing. Kelly, I know you have a large background in VO2 max testing, so I'd love to hear from your perspective a little bit more about VO2 max, what it is, why it's important, all that.
Absolutely. Well, one thing I wanted to add just about what to expect when doing a VO2 max testing, a lot of times people comment that, well, I feel like I could keep going because like my lungs, but we want that. We don't want your lungs to be giving out, right? We're doing an aerobic high intensity test, so a lot of times you're going to be feeling it in your legs. We're going to start to have some metabolic byproduct accumulation, and that's going to be that burning feeling in your legs. So just wanted to put that out there as an expectation. On the treadmill, you're probably still going to feel a little bit of burning sensation in your legs, but not as much as you will on the bike. There were also some differences between a bike and a treadmill. In general, your VO2 max is going to be highest in the form that you most often train in. So if you're a runner, it's probably going to be running. If you're a biker, it's going to probably be highest when you're biking. However, we usually see running to be a higher VO2 max because you're incorporating more muscle groups, and that's going to increase the amount of oxygen that your body's using. So that's just an aside to that. And then in terms of what we can gather from VO2 max tests, so depending on the equipment that you have available, if we are using a metabolic cart, then we're collecting oxygen consumption and CO2 production. So that's going to give us some insights into what's called your respiratory exchange ratio, or the RER. And that's going to help us to see how much carbs you're burning versus how much fats that you're burning. So that's important for potentially screening for metabolic inflexibility. So when we're exercising, we want to be able to easily and efficiently switch between different macronutrient sources of the carbs and the fats for energy. And someone that's metabolically inflexible is going to have a hard time doing that. So being able to have RER scores can be really helpful during the first couple minutes of exercise. Even though a lot of people have a little bit higher RER than we might expect, some of that could just be from being anxious or like going too hard at first. But usually we're going to see that you're burning more fat at lower intensities, which makes sense based on how the body breaks down energy. And then as we get into those higher, more intense portions of the exercise where the resistance is higher, we're using more carbs because that's a quick energy fuel source that's easily broken down by the body. When we get to an RER of 1, that is in theory 100% carbs. You're always using different macros throughout exercise, but based on the oxygen and carbon dioxide ratio, we're assuming that it's 100% in this case because that's the high intensity. But we'll often see that people start to get to 1.05 or 1.1. That's an indicator of anaerobic energy starting to be utilized. We're always using all energy sources at all times in the body, but some are predominant compared to others at different times. So when we see an RER above 1.15, that's typically when we would stop a test because we want to be measuring your aerobic fitness, not anaerobic fitness. So that's kind of a lot of information all at once, so I'm going to pause there. But it's a really great test, super quick and easy to do, especially now that we have things like a VO2 Master where you can take it anywhere. It's not the same as a metabolic cart, but it is helpful for assessing and being able to repeat them on multiple people.
I'm really glad you shared all of that. I think it's really valuable and great that we get their VO2 max score at the end of this test, but we also get lots of other great information on their current health and, again, areas for improvement. So with the heart rate information that we'll get from the test, we can then advise them in training to have specific zone 2 and zone 5 ranges. A lot of the members that come to us have some background information about zone training just through kind of Medicine 3.0 literature, but that can help inform what should my heart rate range be for my low intensity zone 2 training, or when I'm doing really high intensity training at zone 5, what is my personal heart rate range for that? So that can be also very valuable to take away. I know you mentioned the VO2 Master is great because it allows testing to be done other places, and that was a question I had, I wanted to post to you that all of our members have, which is we do our testing either in-house or locally through physical therapy providers that have all the equipment for testing that we trust. But what would you say to a member who does not live local to the Durham-Raleigh area if they're interested in performance testing?
Well, we are partnered with a group called Fitnessity where we can locate VO2 max testing sites. We can also do research on our end. A lot of universities will offer them. You can also try and find a research study to participate in where you do a VO2 max as part of the protocol, and then you can get it easily that way. But we can also do indirect VO2 max testing. So there are different protocols based on, you can also do this if there's a heart condition or a contraindication to doing a maximal test. Then there's submaximal VO2 tests that you can do to estimate a VO2 max. That are there's like a 12-minute walk one, I believe. There's different running ones. There's cycling ones that are specific to once you reach X heart rate, then you go to different wattages, things like that. So there are other options available for sure. And just work with your advisor to find the right one for you.
Definitely. Yeah, we like to communicate that that's an option for all of our members, whether they're local or not, to get performance testing and then get a report on all of their data.
Absolutely. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into some of the strength testing. I know you mentioned that we have upper body strength testing with bench press, where we're doing an estimated 3-rep max, and then we have leg press as well. And then for muscular endurance, we have push-ups, and we've recently added at our physical therapy location that we work with, they've added a dead hang as a muscular endurance grip strength test, and we have grip strength too. So that's a lot of testing, but can you just give us some commentary on those things and what people can expect from that?
Definitely. So after the VO2 max protocol and kind of recovery period, we'll typically move into hand grip strength testing. Hand grip strength is a great measure of overall body strength, interestingly, and definitely great for aging to have strong grip strength. Think of like if you're falling down the stairs and you need to catch yourself, it's really important to have good grip strength kind of as you're aging. So we'll typically do that. We'll get an indication also of discrepancies between right hand and left hand, sometimes depending on if you play golf or if you play even guitar or whatever that may be, you might notice differences in your hand grip strength, which a little bit is okay, but we like to, in all of our tests, kind of see if that's an area to address as well. So we'll do hand grip strength. Like you mentioned, dead hang is also a good indicator of grip strength, which is a pretty fun, challenging test. And then as for maximum strength tests, we do a bench press. We spot them to make sure everything is done safely. We have a protocol we'll work up to a 3-rep max. That's kind of the goal. If a member does not want to go all the way to a 3-rep max, that's totally fine. If they go all the way to a 1-rep max, that sometimes happens, and that's also great. But regardless, we'll use an equation to estimate their 1-rep max to get that percentile data. We're also looking at form, giving kind of guidance on how to improve all of that. And then leg press, same kind of deal there, working up to a goal of a 3-rep max, slowly, but, kind of see where that ends up. And then lastly, muscular endurance testing through push-ups. We will kind of demonstrate good form. So we want to make sure throughout the entire test that they're keeping good form and that they're keeping a steady cadence. So towards the end of the test, naturally, you're going to be tempted to take breaks in between reps as you're getting more tired. But we just kind of take them until failure, as many reps as they can do with good form at a steady cadence consecutively. Kelly, also having a background in strength training, I'm curious what you have to add about all of those tests.
Yeah. Well, I think what's important to keep in mind is we're not just taking the absolute values, but for all of our testing, we're looking at percentile rankings based on your age and sex so that we just are seeing the spread. So we want to try and get closer to like anything above 75th percentile, I would say. 90th would be ideal in most cases when possible, but a lot of times we'll see people come in that are like in the 25th or 50th percentile for upper body strength, and that's definitely something that we want to work to improve. So the advisors are able to make specialized programs for you and recommendations based on that, whether that's just days per week that you're training or writing an entire program. Most people don't have an issue with the leg press. We use that just for safety and for experience levels. A better marker would probably be using a squat, but just because of limitations in mobility and experience, we don't use that. So we don't have percentile data for the leg press, but we use that just as a baseline to track across time. And then we kind of talked a little bit about mobility, so let's just check quickly about the importance of mobility, and then we'll move into our indirect power measure.
A lot of our members join Bionic with the goal of aging comfortably and being able to do the things that they love long term. So whether that be playing a sport or hiking or picking up their kids, that kind of long term functional fitness is a goal for most of our members, and mobility is definitely a large piece of that. I think we notice as we're aging, mobility definitely gets harder. So we will go through shoulder, hip, ankle, knee mobility, and then trunk stability as well. So we'll do several different tests, plank hold, as well as moving through, like looking at squat form, seeing a bodyweight RDL or Romanian deadlift. All of these mobility and movement assessments are not weighted. They're just looking at movement patterns and kind of functional ability. We ask about any pain that they're experiencing with any of these movements. Mobility is also one of those things that you definitely need to train regularly over time. Like yoga is great, and incorporating that into a routine is fabulous, but doing yoga, for 1 week and then stopping, you're not going to see any improvements in mobility. So it's definitely something that you have to keep up over time. But that's an area that a lot of our members find that they could use improvement.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. And I think emphasizing that we can add mobility movements to a warm up. So a lot of times people do static stretching in their warm up, but mobility would help increase your active range of motion before the exercises that you're going to be doing. So leveraging that, so you're building it into your workout routine and using it as an opportunity to improve strength throughout your range of motion. Eventually you can or add weights to certain movements too. So that's just something to keep in mind for people so that we can keep seeing improvements. A lot of times, for example, with squats, range of motion can be limited by ankle mobility and then subsequently hip mobility as well. So being able to have or maintain that and work towards that is going to potentially help improve that, for example. So we also see that limitations in mobility might cause compensations throughout other movements, which could long-term cause injury. So we definitely want to address that early if we can, and then work to improve that over time. So then our last testing measure that we look at is a vertical jump. It's a counter movement jump, and it's an indirect measure of power. So can you just walk through that really quickly?
Mm-hmm. We use a software for vertical jump testing. Like you said, it's a counter movement jump. No swinging your arms. You're not going to get into a super deep squat before you jump, but we have a video app that will just record their jump motion. We'll measure leg length at a couple different positions, and then marking when they take off, when they land. The app calculates how high their vertical jump is. And again, like you mentioned, it's an indirect measure of power. Power is the metric out of all of the ones that we're testing that decline the quickest as we age. So that's definitely an area to kind of get ahead and just incorporate into your training in some way, whether it's plyometric jump training, whether it's just incorporating a few more explosive movements into HIIT or even strength training. We'll kind of chat through some ways to incorporate that into our members' routine currently, or if we're creating a new program, kind of how to incorporate some power training. Kelly, I'd love to hear you chat a little bit about plyometrics. I know you educated the team recently about that, so I'd love to hear, um,
Yes,
yeah, your thoughts.
we did do a little lunch and learn on plyometric training, very brief, but yeah. So I think one thing we want to keep in mind, we have power as rate of force development, but we also want to think about the braking forces because, especially well, day to day life. Let's say you're walking down the street in the winter and you start to slip on a patch of ice, like you want to be able to catch yourself, similar to your stair falling example, or maybe there's something coming at you and you have to quickly move out of the way, so you need to be able to quickly create force to push yourself to move out of the way, but also to break yourself in the movement. So jumping includes like you start on two legs and then you're landing on two legs. If you're doing a hop, you're starting on one leg and landing on the same leg. If you're doing a bound, you're starting on one leg, landing on the opposite leg. So we want to be able to train all these different things for stability and control, to create force, but also to absorb force, which is our braking forces. A common saying in strength and conditioning is you wouldn't drive a Ferrari without brakes, so same with your body. You don't want to be able to have a top end speed and not be able to slow down or stop yourself. That's again how we lead to injury. So it's all about practicing movements and also training to the specific things that we're looking for. One thing with plyometrics is even though they don't often create a large amount of soreness unless you're doing heavy eccentric movements with them, but they are neuromuscularly very demanding. So we want to make sure that we're having adequate rest time. So usually 24 to 48 hours between sessions ideally, and we want to be mindful of total volume. It's measured in contacts, so that's just the number of like contacts with the ground that you're making, or if you're doing an upper body thing, same thing, number of contacts with the upper body. And we want to just be mindful of that throughout the sessions, but also across the week, just to make sure that we're not doing too much too fast. And then keeping in mind that if you're doing other strength training things, we always want to try and have plyometrics at the beginning, before you're fatigued, and then you do your heavier things after that. So yeah.
Another thing I wanted to touch on with all of these, all of them except for leg press and mobility, we will give percentile data. And some of our members happen to be at the top of, percentile. Maybe they're the 90th or 95th percentile, which is fantastic. And a question might be, well, what then? Like, is there still room for improvement? And definitely there is. We even like to see our members in that 95th percentile for two age groups lower than themselves. So that's kind of a takeaway. We talk about optimal health, and we're really wanting to maximize health in all of these areas. So even if they come back with great scores, there's really generally always some area for improvement, or areas for shifted focus. Like maybe you have a great VO2 max, but you're really lacking in the strength department. Like that might be an indication that adding or programming in more strength training is an area to move to. So I would definitely say performance testing is valuable for all of our members. We really recommend it to a lot of people. And I think it's just a really fun experience. I guess outside of the VO2 max test, that one's pretty tough, but it is fun to be able to see members in person. And then the report is a really interesting way to kind of visualize all of these scores, percentiles, recommendations, all of that good stuff. Kelly, how often would you recommend members come in for performance testing to kind of do a regrade or see how things have changed?
Yeah, every 6 to 12 months is a good marker. That's kind of honestly the theme with most of our markers. So we need time to see change. If you're already well trained, it's going to take even more time. If you're a beginner, you're going to see improvements really quickly at first. So 6 to 12 is a good point. And then obviously we kind of touched on this before, but being consistent with what you're doing. If you're sporadic with it, then you're not gonna see as much change. So also being patient with yourself and realizing you're not gonna get every session in. There are gonna be weeks where you're traveling, your life's too hectic, but as long as we're trying to get like 1 to 2 sessions of strength training a week and then maybe 1 or 2 extra cardio days, then you're probably in a good spot. And utilizing like high intensity interval training as a way to be time efficient but also get a big bang for your buck is going to be another tool that we would recommend to people as well.
Mm-hmm. I think it's also been eye-opening for our members. Even some that do regularly strength train will come in and find that they're their strength isn't actually as high as they expected it to be, and that can kind of reveal areas for improvement in programming or in their routine, being more strategic about progressive overload and increasing intensity over time in some way. For everybody at any stage of their fitness journey, I guess, I think it's really valuable to kind of find areas for improvement.
Absolutely. And then the same goes for training endurance, right? So you have your long, slow distance traditional training that you can do, and we want to see you be able to maintain that capacity, especially if your goal is to go for like longer bike rides or run a marathon. Then your training's going to look a little different, and we would decrease the number of strength training sessions. So we still want to do some strength training if you're doing more endurance-based events, because that's going to help to prevent injury, but also we want to maintain a level of strength. So it's just different goals are going to have a shift in how your training looks, and then that's where communicating with your advisor is going to be really helpful so that we can make programs and make recommendations that are specific to the goals that you have. So performance testing is a great opportunity to identify areas for improvement, but also to chat through your individual goals because they look different for everyone. For example, Anna loves running and likes to do longer distance events. I personally don't, besides biking, and my training goal is prioritized towards Olympic weightlifting, so strength and power. Anna still weightlifts because she wants to be strong and be able to maintain that, but there's just different seasons of things that we're each training towards as an example. So, Anna, do you have any closing thoughts to wrap up our performance module podcast?
I guess closing thoughts would be don't be nervous about performance testing. If you're thinking about it, or if you're feeling like, again, you need to be a little bit more trained before you come in for that, I would say don't hesitate and just do it. Again, I think that it gives a lot of valuable information on how to improve in all of these different areas. And again, like Kelly said, giving kind of personalized guidance for making that work for your lifestyle too. Like a lot of people work busy jobs or have families and find that it's hard to incorporate exercise, but we can really work with you one-on-one to slowly kind of add in training or adjust to your specific goals. And I think that that's valuable for anyone at any kind of stage of life. What about you? What are your kind of final takeaways?
I would just echo what you've said already and just elaborate a little bit on the individualized approach. So I think especially if you're starting out with a new program and aren't familiar with movements, it's going to take more time up front and more practice to feel confident with them and to get used to things. So it's going to take just more time in general for training. And over time, that'll go down significantly once you get used to things and the flow of stuff and finding what works for you. In general, strength training is always going to be a recommendation from us because it is important and an indicator of overall quality of life as you age. So just really trying to get ahead, so to speak, now is really important because once you get to a certain point, it becomes a lot harder to maintain muscle and gain muscle, and even things like getting into bone density. So we had a podcast already about the DEXA scan, but heavy weight training and plyometrics are a great way to increase bone density, but it takes a long time for bone to remodel and to grow. So that's going to be a much slower process than, for example, building muscle or even meeting some of your endurance goals. So just keeping that in mind and just being patient because it's just not going to change overnight. It's just going to take it's going to take time and effort, but you have your team here to support you, and that's what we want. We want to help you achieve your goals and hold you accountable and be a resource for you, and then just keeping constant communication with us, so letting us know what's working, what's not, what your needs are, and we're here to help, and that's what our goal is. So thank you for listening, Anna. Thank you for joining today. It's always a pleasure to chat with you.
You as well. Thanks, Kelly.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Medicine 3.0. We make this podcast so that you know where to turn for good information on keeping you and your loved ones healthy. Feel free to check us out at bionichealth.com, where we can help you live a longer, happier life.